Penguin Random House Audio presents The Backroads to March, the unsung, unheralded, and unknown heroes of a college basketball season. This is the author, John Feinstein. This is for Jack Scheuer and Dick Hoops Weiss, mentors, friends, companions. I cherish every minute we spend together, especially in the palestra. To win the game is great. To play the game is greater. But to love the game is the greatest of all. Introduction. Why the back roads? As soon as the buzzer sounded, I closed my computer. Ever helpful, the NCAA had put out its 1 millionth printed statement of Final Four weekend prior to the start of the game, warning all of us in the media that confetti would come pouring out of U.S. Bank Stadium's ceiling as soon as the national championship game ended. Sure enough, here it came, and I quickly closed the computer so as not to have to spend several minutes picking confetti from the keys. Not my first rodeo. It was 10:40 Central Time in Minneapolis, 11:40 in the East, and as was always the case on Monday night, time was precious. For a moment, while waiting to be able to safely open the computer and resume writing, I flashed back 9 years to another Monday night. There were 31 seconds left in the NCAA championship game between Duke and Butler, and the Bulldogs had the ball and had just called a timeout, trailing 60-59. Ohio State Athletic Director Gene Smith, who was that year's chairman of the NCAA basketball committee, was sitting to my left. As the buzzer sounded to end the timeout, Smith leaned over to me and said, "Okay, you're the ultimate defender of the little guy, but you're also a Duke graduate. What do you want to see happen here?" I looked at my watch. It was 11:37 p.m. in Indianapolis. Prior to the game, my editor at the Washington Post had told me that if I wanted my column to make the home edition of the newspaper, he needed it in the office by midnight. I had spent most of the last 30 minutes writing and rewriting as the game swung back and forth. The first 10 paragraphs were unwritten pending the outcome. "Gene, it's 11:37 p.m., I said. I have to hit the send button by midnight or my column won't make most of the morning's papers. The only thing I don't want to see is blanking overtime." Smith laughed. I could not have been more serious. The late, great Dave Anderson, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times columnist, had explained to me early in my career that, quote, "the first rule of sports writing is simple. It's always okay to root for yourself," unquote. On that crisp April evening in 2010, I wasn't rooting for Butler, the David of college basketball, a team that had pulled one upset after another to reach the final game and now had close to 70,000 fans screaming for one last shocker to finish the Disney movie. I wasn't rooting for Duke, my alma mater, coached by Mike Krzyzewski, someone I had known well, liked, and admired for more than 30 years. In the minds of most college basketball fans, Duke wasn't just Goliath, it was Darth Vader, the evil empire in shorts. I wasn't rooting for either team. I was rooting, at that moment, for me. I knew I had a great story regardless of the outcome. I just needed to have time to write it so that the Post's readers would get a chance to read it. 9 years later, I had felt much the same way as the Virginia-Texas Tech national championship game wound down. Like Duke Butler, it was riveting, the teams taking turns appearing to gain control. Virginia had led by 10 late in the second half, but Texas Tech had rallied to take a 68-65 lead with under 20 seconds to play. Somehow, the Red Raiders, a superb defensive team, lost track of UVA's DeAndre Hunter, leaving him wide open in the corner. As soon as I saw Hunter catch the ball, I knew his three-point shot was going in, and the game was going to overtime. Texas Tech lost in overtime. I lost in regulation. But even as the clock ticked toward midnight on the East Coast, and I waited impatiently for it to be safe to reopen my laptop, I was smiling while Virginia celebrated. I was happy for Coach Tony Bennett, who had been brutally maligned a year earlier after the Cavaliers had become the first number 1 seed in NCAA tournament history to lose to a number 16 seed. Prior to UVA's game in Charlotte against the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Number 1 seeds had been 135-0 against number 16 seeds. Just before midnight on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, that record had become 135-1. UMBC 74, Virginia 54. That score hangs from a banner inside UMBC's Retriever Event Center and will be there for as long as they continue to play basketball. That loss hung around Bennett's neck for more than a year. He answered every question, never snapped when it came up, and didn't bother to mention that Hunter, arguably his best player, had been injured that night and watched the game from the bench. Bennett never fell back on the cliches of jock world losers. That's in the past. We've moved on. I only want to talk about the present. Or the catch-all. That was a different team. I'm focused on this team. In a twist, the coach who most wanted to put UMBC 74, Virginia 54 behind him was UMBC coach Ryan Odom. His slogan for his 2018-19 team was, "No looking in the rearview mirror." Odom's Retrievers were a different team. K.J. Mora and Jarris Lyles, the senior guards who had keyed the upset, were both gone. UMBC wasn't just a different team, it had a different place in the college basketball pantheon. No longer did basketball people wonder what the letters UMBC meant when spelled out. Everyone knew what they meant. UMBC 74, Virginia 54. Or, if you preferred, 1 and 135. "It's an amazing story, isn't it?" Bennett said to me about an hour after the Nets came down in Minneapolis, referencing where his team had been that night in Charlotte and where it was now, walking away with the championship plaque. Of course, the NCAA had carefully choreographed every moment of the postgame celebration. First the confetti, then the players and coaches being herded onto a platform where NCAA President Mark Emmert would grab the microphone for a few unneeded words, followed by Basketball Committee Chairman Bernard Muir, the athletic director at Stanford, presenting the plaque to Bennett. Then the nets were cut down, not like in the old days when players hoisted one another and then the coaches up to the rim to get their cuts of the net, but on something called the official ladder of the NCAA. Finally came the playing of the impossibly hokey and corny One Shining Moment, during which the players and coaches were required to stand on the podium looking teary-eyed, and the media was required to clear the area around the podium. Nothing interferes with One Shining Moment. It is, after all, a tribute to the purity of the great moments that make up the NCAA tournament. Forget the FBI corruption investigations, the coaches with multi-million-dollar salaries. This is all about the student athletes. Virginia was a worthy and eminently likable champion, and within 3 weeks of the playing of One Shining Moment, 4 of their starters, all underclassmen, had declared for the NBA draft. From One Shining Moment to Show Me the Money. I didn't blame any of them, even a little bit. As I watched the Virginia players cut down that final net, my mind raced 61 miles down the road, from Charlottesville, Virginia, to Farmville, Virginia. Yes, Farmville, Virginia is a real place, although my wife was very skeptical about that fact on the night of January 24, 2019, when I had traveled there to watch Longwood University host High Point in a Big South Conference game. Classic coaching matchup, Longwood coach Griff Aldrich had said that afternoon. Me, with 12 career coaching wins, taking on Tubby Smith, with 606 and a national championship. Griff smiled. My players better be a lot better than his players, because I'm sure as heck not going to outcoach him. Aldrich's players were good enough that night for a 55-51 victory, cutting the gap between Aldrich and Smith in wins from 594 to 593. During the game, my wife Christine sent me a text. Christine is not exactly a jock. She got her undergraduate degree from Vassar in English literature. She then got a master's from Boston University in English and Irish poetry and worked for 5 years for Robert Pinsky when he was the U.S. Poet Laureate. She was later a literary agent and an editor at Random House. She could undoubtedly have written a poem, or perhaps a sonnet, about the matchup between Aldrich and Smith. But she had no idea who they were, where they coached, or why I might be watching their teams play on a cold night in January. Her in-game text was short and to the point. I forgot where you are tonight, it said. What time will you be home? I'm in.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?